All right, because Trevor Just has been typing "Let's go live."
Let's go.
Let's go. I'm live with Mike Rinella, and I should have asked in all this chatting, did I pronounce your last name correctly, Mike?
You did. It's like if you can say vanilla, like the ice cream, you just stick an R in front of it.
Rinella, perfect.
Rinella.
Very good. Now, we're going to move through several different topics, but I wanted to open up, and I kind of do this with most of my live interviews. Do you remember the very first board game? It doesn't have to be war board game, but the very first board game that you bought or that kind of spoke to you.
I remember the very first game I bought. Let's see if I can get it into the screen here.
NATO. Yes.
NATO. Bought it in 1983 because that was when Ronald Reagan was president and everyone was talking about nuclear war.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, there was a lot of fear.
So I was in college, and I think I actually bought that in the Complete Strategist in Manhattan, wherever their old location was. So they've moved since then. But I'm pretty sure that's the first one that I actually bought with my own legal tender.
Very nice. Mine was also in 83. It was B-17 Queen of the Skies, and it was at the GameStop in Denver. So I think it was called the GameStop. I can't remember. So, all right. Now that's great. I tried to look up how many games you've designed, and I kept finding more and more and more. I think I have the number currently, and I know you've got several in the hopper. I've got it at 26 that are out. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. A number of those are going to be reprints. The Battle Command games that I did with Worthington Games went out of print. I got the rights back, and now hopefully Lock and Load and I are going to redo them. So it's really the same games, but we've rewritten the rules, new components, and so on. So, I mean, if you really count, it's like 20 or 21, I think, in print.
I knew BGG listed you at 21, but then I was looking, and then Judd Vance, my co-host on Hamtag, big fan of yours. Yes, Hamtag. He had also given me a list, and by the way, later there'll be a few questions, one of which may involve the New York Yankees.
Okay.
He says you're a big fan, but like this will lead into one of the questions too, because you're very prolific, but it's with multiple different companies, and I'm very curious kind of how the business works. So let me roll through a few. We have 3 games from MMP, 2 from Worthington, 5 from Against the Odds, the magazine.
Right.
I've got 1 from Last Stand Games, 1 from Compass, and then I show 5 under your own company, Take Aim Games. Yeah. But then I wanted you to fill in a little bit how that's in conjunction with Revolution. Do I have that right, or am I wrong?
Yep. Revolution Games and I are co-publishing those games together. We've talked about this publicly, so it's not like I'm revealing any kind of proprietary knowledge. We split the production costs. I do design, development. I run the play tests and all that. Design, development. I hire the artist. I pay the artist, and then Revolution Games handles orders, order fulfillment, other aspects of production, and so. But those are, I mean, frankly, those 5 games are probably the most lucrative of all my games because I'm a publisher,
right?
You know, I'm not making 3% royalties. I'm making a lot more. I mean, yes, I'm putting up my own money behind them, but it's not a huge amount of money you're investing, and the return is not huge, but it's nice. You know, it's booze money.
No, there you go. See, and that, for those fans that know I got my whiskey show, I've got a little something from Scotch Malt Whiskey Society on the table. So now that's part of my question. Maybe broader is all these different companies, do they come to you, or do you put a design idea out there and then, you kind of have connections that you farm it out to? How does that design acquisition process work?
Well, you go way back to the very beginning. Back in the early 1990s, I was submitting to Avalon Hill. And I actually was exchanging letters, real paper letters, with Don Greenwood.
Sure.
And I submitted a number of designs. They didn't make the cut. In the mid 90s, we were talking about what would be a good follow-up to Breakout Normandy, which is like still probably the most popular area impulse game. And the topic we settled on was Market Garden. And so I started designing an area impulse Market Garden game for Avalon Hill. And then just as I finished it, Avalon Hill closed their doors.
Yes.
So to make a long story short, I shopped the design around, and it ended up with MMP because MMP at that time was selling off the remaining stock of Breakout Normandy in a deal with Hasbro. So they took on Monty's Gamble Market Garden, which became my first published game. I did a couple more games with them, and it was just like at that point, me bringing them games. And but eventually that sort of ended because I was getting, I was designing more and more games, but the whole model, pre-order model of publishing takes so long to get a game in print. You got to wait and wait and wait for the game to reach the pre-order number, and then wait and wait and wait until the components get in the queue to be printed. And then you finally start seeing your first nickel of royalties. So at that point, I had designs just piling up, and I was getting frustrated. So I don't know if I approached against the odds or if they approached me, but that became I was very happy with that relationship because magazine game publishing, it's faster. They basically say, we're going to publish your game. Here's a check for the game. And I was like, oh, okay. That means you've already paid me. You've invested in the game. So now there's a fire lit under you to publish the game and recoup your money. So that led to the multiple collaborations with Against the Odds, because magazine publishing is really a different kind of publishing model than the more traditional, boxed game publishers.
Well, that's intriguing right there. So they're basically paying you, literally paying you up front, and then they know, now we've got this, where are we going to fit it into our magazine queue?
Yeah.
And so it's obviously because they're hitting repeated deadlines, they need to have content for the magazine.
Right. Yeah. But, and it was also fun to be able to write articles to go with the game. My single Charlie was with Against the Odds for Not War But Murder, the Battle Cold Harbor game, and both the game and the article won the Charlie Award that year. Was it 2007 or 2008? So that was fun. Being able to write a historical article of some length to actually go with the game you were publishing, because normally you're counting the columns, trying to reduce the rule book and the player's guide and all that to a certain number of pages to keep printing costs down. Right. But in a magazine, magazine is a magazine. So, and from there, I primarily, I think from there, I had enough games in print that I could just email people and say, oh, hi, I'm Mike Rinella. I've designed a game on this, and would you be interested? And that's led to, I'm hoping to do more games with Compass, and I did a couple with Worthington, and there was a period of time, I was laid off in the end of 2008. So in 2009, 2010, I sort of call that the lost years of designing, because I was just so busy looking for jobs, and the games I designed weren't bad games, but I was desperate for money. I was just designing them and say, hey, will you pay me money for this game? Now with my own company, we can take our sweet time. The most recent games, you can't really see it behind my shoulder here. The Corregidor game, Return to the Rock, Corregidor. I can't.
Yep, you're right there.
Right there. We play tested that for a year and a half. Just played it over and over and over again. And my opponent, I have a gaming group in Germany. They're called the Bavarian Raiders, I think.
Oh, I love that.
And I don't know. They love destroying designers' work. They find put it this way: they would find a flaw in the game to exploit, and I'd be like, oh, you're right. Yeah, no, that won't work. They would make me play out the entire game anyway. We wouldn't just say, okay, stop, rewrite the rule, start over again. Nope. They made me. They would make me suffer my mistake.
Take it to completion.
Yep. And then and believe me, then lesson learned. You change that rule, and you're like, Nick, I'm never going to go through that again. But they're very good, and we have all the time in the world if we have to. A year and a half, play tested dozens of times, and I think they're great games. I mean, and that's, anybody in the business can say, it's the main stumbling block for a lot of games is they don't get enough play test and development.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've got Judd Vance, who's fellow Hamtag co-host here, yelling, "Hey, Mike."
Hamtag.
Yes, he loves your Area Impulse games. He told me he was going to go into Vassal retirement, but then you kept creating games, so he flat out could not do that because he has to be the one to get yours out on Vassal. And I have to ask for him, in terms of the New York Yankees, knowing that you're a fan, who is your favorite player?
Of all time, or
Let's go all time and current, just so I can cover the bases, and he may say more on this.
When I was a teenager, it had to be Reggie Jackson. I mean, Mr. October, 3 home. I remember watching the game where he hit the 3 home runs.
Wow.
So yeah, Howard Cosell. So yeah, definitely him. In the 80s, it was Mattingly, and then in the current championship years, who did I like best? Well, that's tough to say. I mean Jeter, because Jeter was just so clutch all the time. Sure. I mean, I was such a critic of certain players who I will not embarrass in a broadcast. who I called them the king of war and the pauper of clutch. Certain players that would go 0 for the postseason all the time. We won't use their names.
No,
but that was not Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter was always Mr. Clutch.
Yeah, you got Judd chiming in here, so I'm making sure I get him in. Oh man, that's good. Yeah, Judd, like I said, huge fan. He also let me know that you won wood or the plaque at WBC with Breakout Normandy. Was that 2005?
I won the whole enchilada in 1999.
Oh, okay.
It was actually wasn't that? No, actually, I won in 1998. That was the last Avalon Con. I won it the year after when it became Don Con or whatever it was called back then. But no, my local opponent and I would usually play 2 to 3 games a week of Breakout. Wow. And it was funny because he would beat me pretty consistently. And then I went to the WBCs thinking, well, I'll win a game or two. And then I'm like crushing people left and right. And I'm like, what? And I didn't realize I was playing like one of the best all around players in the world. I mean, Marvin Birnbaum is, multiple trophies, multiple woods, he's won everything from Breakout Normandy to Monsters Ravage America. I mean, you name it, he's won it. We the People, he's won. So he was my local opponent, and I thought, well, I'm mediocre. And then went to the WBCs, and I'm like, oh, I am pretty good. I mean, the only people I would ever lose to in those early years were like Don Greenwood, the designer, or people of that. The people that you see on the the list of winners over the years, those are the people that if I lost, I would lose to. But yeah, no, 99 was the year I won it all, and my team won the team trophy that year too.
Excellent.
The only thing I've ever won since then is my own game, Monty's Gamble. I won that in 2004, which is kind of like you don't really admit that. Oh, you won your own game. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the
Now, there's a long question here from Mike D. So he says, okay. Mike R., I've thought about starting game design. Do you recommend starting your own company for game design, dev, etc., and then find a publisher, or do all in-house? Thanks, MD Ranch, Colorado, USA.
That's a tough one. See, I remember when I decided to start my own company, looking into how do you do that, and printing boxes, printing the maps, finding the right printers and the right paper quality. I mean, it was just so laborious, and I was just so glad when Revolution Games came along and said, "Hey, we'll handle all that. You can just do the designing and play testing and the artwork." And I was like, "Oh, that's all? Fine." You got to have a good head for business. I mean, I know the top dogs now are like outsourcing their stuff to China, and
Right.
you have to you have to have business contacts there, and there's certain difficulties with dealing with China because of the language barriers, and I don't know, their printing priorities,
Sure.
getting the stuff shipped to the U.S. and what happens if they ship everything and the counters are like upside down. I mean, how do you rectify an issue with a publisher that far away? And
Right.
I would really tell anybody that's designing for the first time to just try to hook up with a publisher. And the magazine game publishers, I think, are good because they're looking for smaller games, simpler games. Like I said, a lot of the magazine publishers will pay you up front for the game. So you actually see a reward immediately. Not, I mean, I'm going to tell you this. I finished designing Breakthrough Cambrai in 2005. I did not see a penny of income from that game until 2011.
Wow.
6 years.
Wow.
So if you're going to work with the box game publishers, especially if they use what they call the P500 or just the PX model, pre-order model, you can wait. You can wait a long, long time. I've never worked with GMT, so I don't know how long their designers wait between reaching the pre-order mark and then actual holding a physical copy of the game and, getting it at royalty check and all that. But it's a long time. So if you're a new designer and you want to get into print faster, I would recommend finding a magazine publisher. But, it's funny. I think I was lucky in the sense that I really started designing right at the time that Avalon Hill folded. And it was sort of like this Wild West situation because all these new publishers were springing up like mushrooms to replace Avalon Hill for the hobby. And I just happened to be there at that particular moment in time. Now I look at it and I'm like, I'm just stunned by the volume and the diversity of all the games. I've said online, if I wasn't designing Area Impulse games, I wouldn't design games anymore because I can't find a publisher for my card-driven games. They just we got so-and-so doing that, or, we got 6 of those in the pipeline and we don't need more. So I'm like, well, I'll just keep doing Area Impulse games and publishing them myself because the market right now seems so saturated with great designs, designers, and so on. I mean, maybe in a few years, there's still designers like dating back to the 70s, the golden era. Eventually they're going to retire and maybe there'll be another round of openings in publishing. I don't know. It seems to me very tough for a new designer to break in right now because it's just like every publisher just seems to be stocked to the gills with stuff in their pipelines. And the biggest issue is like getting the stuff out. So, and there's, they're risk aversive. They're going to work with people that they know, and that's unfortunate, but that's how everything works.
Right. And that can be the benefits of a P500, because if a innovative idea or mechanism comes out and it really does catch the imagination, it can get pre-funded quickly, which tells them, hey, yeah, let's move it up in the hopper. What is it? GMT, I think their Solitaire Mr. President game, which caught them off guard. It's Solitaire, and it like fired up to, I think, 2,000 pre-orders right away. And they were like, wow, move it up to the art department.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, they were like, goodness, that I don't think they anticipated that at all. Well, and that you just covered literally one of my questions was, because I noticed a lot of area impulse. No, that was perfect though, because I was sitting here thinking,
Yep.
and Judd loves your area impulse games, and I saw that there were some other ones, but you just hit
right
on why.
There are a few other people, I think, doing at least. You see, there are area map games that aren't really area impulse games. To me, an area impulse game has a certain kind of game engine that traces its heritage back to the Avalon Hill Quartet, Storm over Arnhem, Thunder at Casino, Turning Point Stalingrad, and Breakout Normandy. Most of what I've done traces back to those games. I've just continually tinkered with, well, what if you do this? What if you had 3 kinds of weather instead of 1, or with my newest games, what if you make the number of impulses a player gets random rather than the number of impulses in a single turn random? Because that was one of the biggest critiques of like Breakout Normandy is like, you could have a turn which ends on impulse 2 and nothing happens. And people were like, but that would never happen in a real campaign. They didn't just sit there and look at each other for 24 hours. And, but it's still, but that was a great mechanism to create uncertainty in players, because the old traditional hex games, you move all your pieces, you roll combats, the other guy moves all his pieces while you sit there watching him. And with area impulse, it's like you do an impulse, boom, it's the other guy's turn, and then boom, it's back to you. It's so, I mean, when we first discovered that, we were like, this is great. There's no downtime. And so I lost track of the question. But yeah, no, there are new players, new designers that I think that are looking into that genre more. And I wish more people would do it, because I would buy their games and play them. And
I just like this comment, so I threw it up there. Master Rinella, first of all, definitely caught my attention. So he loved your idea of starting small and working with mag publishers approach, much less complexity, easier business entry point, etc. Thanks much.
And and again, for a new designer, try to submit something that's as polished as you can. I mean, maybe there's like some of the top dogs that like turn in half-baked stuff because they know a great developer is going to get assigned to it. If you're new, I would say play test it with people that are going to savage the game. I mean, that's what I was saying before. I have play testers that are just like, they just look for every nook and cranny to exploit and break the game. If you just like push the counters around and play the game and like in a gentlemanly like manner, you're not going to find the weaknesses and players will find the weaknesses when the game is published. Believe me.
Oh yeah.
I've been pleased that the 5 games that I've published under Take Aim Designs seem to be very solid. I mean, there's the usual, newbie questions you field online. But there's really been none of that. Like, oh, if I do this and I do this, doesn't that happen? And the game's busted, and you thank God that's never happened, because it can. We know many games that have. I mean, even like some of the biggest games of all time, like Paths of Glory. Remember when there was the limited war strategy? You just never played. You never pushed the war status beyond a certain point, and they had to fix that. That literally broke the game, even though it was a really, really. I mean, believe me, I bought it. I owned it. I based my own card-driven game, Shifting Sands, on it. It's a great game, but it's been broken because players will find the weakness and stick a knife in the heart of the game, and then you got to fix it.
Yeah, so, that's its own like sub-joy element of players that want to try to look for the exploits or whatever.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Now, here's a question: your art design with your games, Charles Keebler.
Yep, Charlie.
Charlie, see, I don't know him, but Judd, I'll admit, I don't know. Judd is such a good deep dive, and he loves Charlie's maps. I mean, they're works of art, and Judd kind of opened my eyes to that.
Yep, he did the Breakout Normandy map. He did the Turning Point Stalingrad map. So his lineage, is extensive. He's not a new artist.
Right.
But no, and he's just, he's done all my games. And he's great to work with. I mean, I can't talk him up enough. I mean, I don't know if you heard that he suffered a fall and
I did
he's
not.
I think he fell off a ladder or something, and he broke his arm and his wrist, and he's a freelancer with no health insurance. So he's running a what do you call it, group funding? What is that thing where out? I can't
like
remember
the crowdfunding stuff.
Crowdfunding. Yeah, he's got a. I mean, I just want to. I mean, I hate to plug that, but I mean, a lot of Americans don't have health insurance. He's one that doesn't, and his medical bills were just ridiculous because it was like, surgery to a broken wrist and all those things. So so yeah. If you can help Charlie, definitely do it. He's one of the legends.
Kickstarter, or is it on the GoFundMe?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, but anybody can look. I bet you Judd will even look while we're on here if Judd's still on. Judd, if you are, see if you can look that up. Throw a little link on.
Yeah, I know he's about about halfway to his goal. So I mean, I'm hoping eventually he can cover those costs. But yeah, no, he's one of the Avalon Hill legends. I mean, he's been doing artwork since, I don't want to say the dawn of time, but for a very long time. And he's done all, I'm trying to think of all the games he did: Operation Battle Axe, Last Battle Ieshima, Patton's Vanguard, and Counterattack Eris, and now the newest game, Return to the Rock, Corregidor. And I'm actually working on an article for that game for War Diary magazine, combination historical article and game article on the Corregidor game, because it's an absolutely fascinating small campaign. It's combined amphibious airborne operation where the Americans had awful intelligence. They thought there were 600 Japanese on the island. There were 6,000 Japanese on the island. There was, the island was rigged to blow up. I mean, they had tons of TNT. So there's booby traps everywhere. It's a very, very interesting small campaign. And plus, Corregidor was, the huge symbol of the Pacific War in many ways, because it was like the last outpost that we lost in the opening months of the war. When I say we, I mean America.
Right.
It was the last outpost that was surrendered. And then it was, of course, MacArthur with his famous "I shall return." Well, he really returned when he returned to Corregidor. So I don't know. I just really love that game and all the minutia of it. And I'm going to do an article for War Diary on it. If I can find the time to write it.
Beautiful. Now I'm looking here. Judd said GoFundMe. It's a GoFundMe page. See the link above. And I'm going to spend some time on here. Ooh, I almost hit they put the end broadcast button right next to the arrow up on the comments. That is terrible. Luckily, I have to confirm that anyway, so I almost hit it. I'm looking, Judd. I want to make sure I get that out I'm going to just say Charlie, like I know Charlie, like you do. But I would like to get that out, Judd. So if you can copy that link and throw it back in, I'll highlight it up on the screen. Judd, or anybody else, if it's James Brazil that had it or anything, because we definitely want to help Charlie out with that. So we'll let that work, and I'll keep I'll be a little bit sidetracked on my comments on the side to see if that comes up. Let's see. I wanted to go into your design philosophy, because from what I understand, and Judd helped me out a lot on this, because Judd is a big fan of yours, so I tapped his knowledge. Correct me where I'm wrong or he's wrong. So easy setup, plays in 2 hours or less.
Yes.
You already covered play tested, and balanced.
Right.
Affordable, and a clean rule set.
That sounds about right.
Awesome. And
that's my company's design. I don't know if it's everybody's, but
right. But I think that's what he was referencing as far as your design philosophy. With Take Aim Design, is that it fits into that kind of that.
Yeah, get on the soapbox here. I've seen this new trend in the hobby now back towards gigantism. The 17 maps, the 7,000 counters, and that's what nearly killed the hobby in the 80s. Why are we doing this again? I like a half sheet of 5/8 inch counters. That's like, what is it? 88 counters. A one map, 12 pages of rules. You set it up in 5 minutes, you play it in 2 hours, you pack it up, you're done. because people have less and less time for gaming, most of them.
Right.
And I don't understand why I see all these games coming out now that are just like, they cost $300. They have all these components, and I'm like, and nobody plays them. And were they ever play tested? I mean, how do you play test the game with 17 scenarios with thousands of counters in each scenario? I mean, does that even happen? He says from his soapbox. I would never I would never try to design a game like that. I don't know how you can do it right. I mean, maybe there's people out there that are doing it right. Or maybe there are people out there that just like to buy a game in a box for the status of it, to say, hey, I own, such and such, that $200 game with the 10 million counter sheets, and it's sitting on my shelf, it's for status.
Right. The longest day. So just to go way back in time.
That's a really far back in time.
Yeah, well, it's funny, as I was a kid in like probably 85, I started, because I was B-17 Queen of the Skies, and then I got into Ambush, and I was living up in the mountains of Colorado, so I was doing a lot of solitaire gaming. I was 13, 14, 15 in that era. And it was so funny because I loved World War II. I'd seen the movie The Longest Day. The big red box always caught my attention, and it looked so fabulously awesome. But I knew I would never – I don't even think I could afford it at the time. So when I got older and I was more established and I was getting back into games, you know what I had to do? I had to get on eBay and go get The Longest Day, and it's just sat on my shelf, and I keep thinking – I need to sell that to somebody that'll play it.
I don't even know if that game's a good simulation or not. I mean, I just know it's huge.
Yes.
And when it comes to topics, I mean, Market Garden was the first topic that I ever published. And it's a popular topic. There are still new Market Garden games coming out. But I still think I have a preference for my own, Monty's Gamble Market Garden, because it sets up quickly. It's 4 turns. You can play it in 2 to 3 hours. You never have you never have the allies north of Arnhem in one day. You never have the allies stuffed at the canal, Joe's Bridge at the canal in one day. It usually is a tight, close game every single time. And so I don't know. I don't know why you need to go bigger.
Right. I'm with you. I'm still trying to find this link just to help Charlie out. And Judd says it's in the preceding link, so I can't find it. We'll move on. If somebody can get a good-looking hyperlink or something I can throw up there. But again, you can go look at the GoFundMe page and probably find it under Charles Keebler. So let's see. Where am I at? And I think we're doing great here. Let me know if I've missed something. I got off base. I did not know Charlie hurt himself there.
Sure. I mean, and I don't want to be discouraging to anybody that wants to design a game, because I mean, ultimately, you design the game for your enjoyment and maybe your friends' enjoyment. I mean, the next step to designing games where you get royalty checks is another step in the progression of designing games. And don't feel, I mean, I would never say don't feel bad if your game doesn't get published. If you and your friends just, like it and play it and enjoy it, that's the success of its own. The business aspect of it. There's annoying moments. I mean, I've often told people game design is a lot like the movie business. The designer is the script writer, the publisher is the producer, the developer is the director, and the play testers are the actors. And every one of those individuals starts to reinterpret the material. So you have designers like saying, stop developing it in that direction. And you have publishers that say, oh, I want you to do this in the game because it'll sell more, And so believe me, I've been part of those behind the scenes arguments where people are like, I'm never working with you again. You screwed my game. You screwed it, pardon my language. So have a thick skin, because you may end up in those kind of deals, because it is a business and everybody's, ultimately looking to, make their share of coin. And and the designer share of coin is rather small. What is it saying? Don't quit your day job. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And Judd's just clarified, it looks like because it's a link, it's probably being blocked as it comes through. So, but you can look up Charlie Keebler in the search box, and then Matt puts on here after the domain, and then he's got that link there. So this is for anybody in post that's watching this after the live is ended. You can see that. And of course, you can go to the GoFundMe page and just look up Charlie Keebler, and you can help out there as well. So that is perfect.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we get him, not knowing that it happened, that we get him a little bit of help.
And anything helps. I mean, this is the great thing about this, what do you call it, crowdfunding. Is if everybody chips in $1 or $2, you suddenly reached your goal. So you don't have to think that you have to, like, especially now with this economy, you don't have to break your piggy bank open. I mean, send $1. I mean, every dollar helps, that's.
Here's a great, let me get this up from Ray. Any thoughts to a quote? And I think you already, but I'll just Crete game. It seems like a great topic for your recent designs.
Well, I did design a hex-based game on Crete, which is, if you go to the Lock and Load website, it is available for pre-order. It's supposed to be the first of 4 games that are basically redesigned reprints, new editions of the Worthington games that I did 10 years ago, which came out with frankly, the rules were half-baked. They came out too fast. But now we've rebaked the rules so that they are baked. And all new artwork. The artwork is gorgeous. Go to the Lock and Load website. You can see the new artwork for the Crete game, and it's very nice. And the other thing about Lock and Load is as far as I understand it, they're also going to bring out a computer version of the same game, because they do computer games as well. I know my agreement with them mentions computer games. But if the question is, are you going to ever do Area Impulse Crete? Oh, that would be tough.
You're reading his mind here. He literally just posted that after you said that.
Yeah, it's tough because if the Germans don't get slaughtered on the initial landing, where is the game after that? Because once they capture an airfield and start overwhelming the Allies, where's the game? I mean, the Allies basically have, they can either die on Crete or they can bug out for the nearest harbor and get back to Cairo or Alexandria or wherever. It's a tough game to do. And many people have done great games on it for sure. I mean, I'll tell you that what I'm looking to do next when the economy improves and my job situation improves is I did start designing a Operation Avalanche game on the invasion of Salerno. Because that to me is almost more interesting than the Normandy invasion. I mean, the Allies hadn't really learned the ropes yet of a full amphibious landing, and it was touch and go. They almost got driven back into the sea. Whereas at Normandy, they had everything figured out, overwhelming air power, overwhelming naval power. The Germans just got crushed every time they tried to mass for an attack. Whereas at Salerno, I mean, they were writing up the orders, evacuate the beach. The Germans are, if they're firing on us, I mean, it was really touch and go. So I'd like to see if I could do that in Area Impulse. I mean, I think it would work. And again, I would aim for a simpler, quicker playing game than Breakout Normandy. Because Breakout Normandy, even when you're, an expert player, is still a 4.5 to 5.5 hour game. I mean, I'd rather get it into that like 2 to 3 hour sweet spot. So I think Salerno is a good topic. Crete, like I said, it's tough. I mean, never say never, like Sean Connery.
Sure. Now I've got to ask, this is another one for Judd. Judd's huge Revolutionary War fan. You're so close. You live in Albany. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
Yes.
Have you been to, and I'm imagining you have, Ticonderoga, the fort, and Saratoga?
Yes, I've been to both. I tried doing a little Ticonderoga game years ago and submitted to Against the Odds magazine, but it was crap. It just there's again, it's another one where it's like there's all the basis of a good game, but you got to do it really carefully because it's like, yeah, I mean, the French are in their fort, the British march up Lake George, and then bang their head against the fort defenses and get slaughtered, and then retreat back down Lake George. I mean, so how do you get a game out of that? We sort of like in discussion about that design said it really needs to be part of a bigger campaign where Ticonderoga's an objective of the British, but not the only objective. Because if you force the French player to think more about Lake Champlain, maybe, or I don't know, some other parts of you don't want to redo Wilderness War, of course. I mean, you don't want to do the whole French and Indian War or whatever. Is that the official name of it? Or is that like the old, not PC name, French and Indian War? I don't know what it's called now.
You got to pass. Yeah, that is a time in history where that was the name. We'll go with that.
Okay. When you grew up in the 70s, that was what it was called. So I mean, yeah, there has been some talk, some thought of that. Saratoga, I think I've looked at, and again, that's another tough one because the British were really like at the end of their tether by the time they got to Saratoga, and they kind of had like one shot. And to me, it's like, well, even if they wanted Saratoga, were they still going to get to Albany anyway? Because they were like out of food, they were starving to death. From what I remember reading about it.
Waiting on Clinton to bring his troops up, which was never going to happen.
So that's a tough one. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, more American Civil War games, and they've said, stop doing Robert E. Lee games, get out of the Eastern Theater, do something else. And I'm like, well, I like the Eastern Theater, and the whole idea with the Against the Odd games was always from the beginning to do this Robert E. Lee trilogy. And now with the Chancellorsville game that is now officially announced, the trilogy is done. We did Lee at the beginning with the 7 Days campaign. We're doing Lee at the Zenith with Chancellorsville, and then we're doing Lee at the end with Cold Harbor, or we already did. So I'm satisfied with that. People say, well, Gettysburg. And I'm like, no.
I had a question on your trilogy games because you have the other trilogy set working kind of at the same time. Do you like when you do a trilogy, do you know exactly what three, or do you even have the trilogy idea? Or is it just a set of games? No.
I mean, the whole reason for the trilogy was the overwhelming success of Not War But Murder. The Cold Harbor game when it won Charlie's and everybody loved it. I mean, people were saying this is the best magazine game of all time, and you're like, ego, keep it contained, So at that point, it was natural to do a follow up, and when you do a follow up, well, you might as well make it a trilogy. So and I like them all. I mean, they're all different games, and it would be hard to pick a favorite, but they're all in the Eastern Theater. Lee is the Confederate commander in all three. But there certainly are other Civil War battles that I think could fit the area impulse system. I mean, I'm occasionally tempted to do Antietam or Sharpsburg because I owned that game. What was it called? Bloodiest Day, which was an area impulse game on that battle, but it just doesn't quite work. It just doesn't work. I mean, I've played it with people, and the combat is too bloody. There's a number of issues. So, it's a tempting battle. But again, it's been done, and and what I mean, like the Confederates sit there, and McClellan batters his army against their defenses and screws up royally all the time. McClellan had like 3 corps that he never used in the battle. Like a player is ever going to do that.
Right. He had a hard time breaking those beautiful cores. So here's Judd's follow-up here. Upstate New York has such rich history in the 18th century that when I'm out there, I'm always going to sites. I was curious if you visited them since locals often skip what's around them. Yeah, he'd asked me, can I please ask you that question? And he actually was the impetus of me reading Saratoga, which I love reading, but I've been working so hard. I've just been taking it at little drips and drabs here or there, and I'm almost done. We're literally where Arnold is. I had no, I knew it's not really the era that I studied a lot, and I knew, of course, the traitor Arnold. I didn't know this fierce ride out in front and gather up other units and keep thrive. Oh, I
I
was.
mean, Benedict Arnold was like the Jon Snow of the Union Army.
Yeah.
Until he became Ramsay Bolton, you know. Yeah, no, he was. He was a very good general. And he made that big mistake.
Oh gosh,
And
yeah. I mean, yeah. Judd had mentioned the book, and I was like, I've got to go. He mentioned it in a ham take show. I'm like, I've got to read this. So I went and got it. And as I'm going through, and you're reading how Gates is definitely removed, kind of, and Arnold's right in the action, and I'm like, wow. So thanks to Judd on that one.
I would say that I know Judd, Revolutionary War, Northeast, but frankly, I find the World War II in the Pacific increasingly interesting because it's been done so little. You have a lot of naval games. I mean, you have what is it? Empire of the Sun.
The Sun, yeah, Mark Herman's,
which I think Judd likes.
Yeah, a little bit.
So you have those big campaign games that are very centered on the naval engagements. But I've liked these like savage little island battles, and of which I've done Ieshima and Corregidor. But there's so many other options out there. I mean, like something in New Guinea, for example, and Guadalcanal. Yeah. I mean, potentially. I mean, Don Greenwood and I talked about Guadalcanal back in the early '90s. But you see, one of the things about designing today is that the internet has changed everything. I mean, back when I started designing, it meant a trip to the local library, hours going through books, taking out the ones that until you literally had a load so big you couldn't carry anymore, and then reading them page by page to find. I mean, now you can go online, find a PDF, run a word search. I mean, you can rip through sources. I mean, and now you can find like for Patton's Vanguard, a lot of my sources were master's theses by Army officers.
Really?
What's the place in Kansas? The fort or
Fort Riley.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them do master's thesis on World War II battles as part of their military education, and you can find these now. They're public domain. They're online, and you can quickly get up to speed on a battle because it's written by a military professional. There's nothing wrong with historians, but the military professionals writing for a military audience, and they often have better order of battles. Not necessarily better maps, but at least they can tell you where to find good maps. I mean, the internet has changed everything in terms of prepping and researching a game. And I mean, like many designers, when I started out, my game components were literally hand drawn. Now, I was lucky that I was once an art major before I switched to political science. So my prototypes weren't wretched, but they were still bad. But now I create stuff in Paint Shop Pro and just pilfer, stuff from online, cut and paste.
Sure.
And people are like, is this a published game? And I'm like, no. I stole this from about 20 different sources. We need a real artist to make the real game, but this is what I'm thinking. I can tell the publisher, this is what I have in my head. This is what I want the map and the counters to look like. And sometimes you're just lucky, like in the case of Last Battle Ieshima, that I hooked up with the Ernie Pyle Museum, and they had this, 50 megabyte JPEG of the original Army intelligence map of Ieshima, and they're like, "Do you want this?" And I'm like,
"Yes."
And plus, the only reason I designed that game was because of the Ernie Pyle Museum. They actually approached me and said, "We'd like a game for our gift shop. Could you design one? Is there a game there?" And I said, "Well, let me look." And I checked, and I'm like, "Yeah, no, this could work as a game." And then they provided me the map, and the game looks gorgeous. I mean, Charles Kibler designed around the Army intelligence map, but I mean, what's better than playing on the actual April 1945 Army intelligence map? Yes. I mean, that's wargaming.
And I love Ernie Pyle. Man, I love his voice that came. Yeah, I was another fan of just reading what he put out, and the way he even learned is before he even went into the military to write for World War II, how he wrote as he traveled across the United States. great. Wow.
Yeah, and you know, of course, that Ieshima is where he was shot and
Yes.
killed.
Yeah.
So there was that connection in the game too.
Oh God. Yeah. When I'd read his book, there were literally like guys in the European theater that were pissed at guys in the Pacific theater because they didn't protect him good enough. I mean, that's how close they felt. And they were like, God dang, the Pacific theater was just so, I mean, even, I've got buddies that aren't as much into the history that go, oh, did you like Band of Brothers? Yeah. What about Pacific? Sure. And it kind of shows you the differences with one's from more of an officer senior NCO perspective, and it's the same guys in the same unit. The other one is island hopping. So you're kind of forced to jump around a little bit, but man, I was a medic in the Army, and even the difference between treating wounds in a humid climate is, it's just,
No, I mean, just reading about Corregidor, I mean, the moment you got a wound, evidently the flies were all over you. You just had to get it covered immediately. And yeah, no, it's nothing like say the North African desert. Although there were a lot of flies there too, but that's true. Not quite tropical flies.
Back in Colorado before I moved to Kansas, I dated a gal whose father, I think he landed day 2, D-Day day 2. And then he got wounded lightly, was back for 3 months, and then he came back and he got wounded severely with a grenade. But the Germans came up, captured him, treated him, gave him something to eat, left him and another guy in a barn, spoke English, and told them, hey, we're falling back. Your guys will be with you in a couple hours. Well, just the difference between what's going on with, wounded folks in Iwo Jima or whatever. I mean, on both sides. So I'm not.
Pacific was a totally different,
different
war. Just from what I know from Corregidor, I mean, by that point, the American Army had learned you're not going to get many POWs, and so if there was and Corregidor was, I was surprised. Corregidor was like, it's riddled with caves. I mean, it's not just like a flat, even though it's called the Rock. It had just hundreds of caves, and every cave was like a Japanese stronghold, and they just basically had developed a routine. You do this, you do this, you do this, you drop this bomb here, you do this with napalm, and they just sealed them up. They didn't even. If you asked for surrender, you usually just got a hail of gunshots, and
throw in a burn it out and throw a satchel charge in, burn it again, and move on. So
it was a very different kind of combat.
Yeah. Wow.
I have to put in one plug though while I'm here.
Please.
Project. I mean, as Judd knows, I have for years been working on a card-driven World War II Eastern Front Magnus Opus, and that's Clash of Tyrants. And the design is largely done, but like any card-driven game, it's got to be play tested, because with all those permutations of card play, you can bust the game any number of ways just with the card play. Forget about game balance and all that. But that took forever to get around to doing, and forever to actually I designed it pretty quickly because it was all in my head by that point. And I have high hopes. I think it's as good or better than Shifting Sands, which, even though it's a card-driven game, is, I mean, if you just look at the number of ratings at Board Game Geek, it has like twice as many ratings as any other game of mine. Because the card genre is just more popular than Area Impulse. So I'm hopeful that when that game comes out, it's going to be, so like hotcakes. It's Eastern Front. I mean, it's the Eastern Front. It's the whole enchilada. I think I think it's got more there than the World War II Desert Campaign of North Africa, which is really ultimately until the Tunisian campaign, it's only a handful of divisions. But I mean, but you're talking Soviet Union. I mean, it's just millions of combatants going at each other for years, and so I am very psyched about that game. I mean, there's been a lot of new research that's come out, even just like in the last couple of years, on Soviet war production and German rail capacity. I mean, there's all these new things that have come out that helped to explain why the campaign unfolded the way it did. Why a lot of games up until now have been basically, Axis fantasies. I mean, unless the Germans blow a weather roll in 1941. I mean, you remember the game, Avalon Hill's game was at Russian Front.
Sure.
Which is sort of like it's Russian campaign with a little finer grain. I played that, and my opponent rolled clear weather all the way through to December. He was in Gorky, the Urals. I mean, it was, and I don't care how good, I don't care how well the Germans fought, how many battles they won. They weren't going to reach the Urals or Gorky or anything in 1941. They would have never gotten that close. They would have been very fortunate to capture, the big three, Moscow, sure, Leningrad, and Rostov, if that. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that this will be a really good conflict simulation of the war in the East, but the cards also add so much flavor, and I'm aware of the other card-driven Eastern Front games that are out there, like Barbarossa to Berlin and
sure,
what is it, Stalin's War. So I was very careful to design cards that gave a lot of flavor, but weren't just carbon copies of the exact same cards.
Nice. Very good. Now that's awesome. Now we're getting down to the last few minutes here. What else? I mean, by all means, what else do you want to highlight, showcase, or even just shine a light on?
I think I've talked about most of my stuff that's in the pipeline. There's the Chancellorsville game with Against the Odds. There's the Battle Command Hex game reprints with Lock and Load Publishing. There is a new edition of Monty's Gamble out with MMP, which is doing very well from what I've heard. There's like a whole new generation of players that are discovering that game now, which really surprises me. I thought just like the same people would buy the game, but there's a lot of new players. There's the card-driven Eastern Front game that I just mentioned, which is probably going to be with Compass. Compass published by Festung Europa game. So they're definitely psyched to have it. I mean, we just got to play test it and make sure it's publishable. There's a question there. A
question from Mike D regarding permutations in CDGs. Have you ever thought about applying a software automated approach to exercise all possible permutations / combos? Some applications of neural nets may help too.
That would be a great idea if I had any ability to do. I would need somebody with, I can barely keep my computer monitor working. Making
power down and power back up.
So I think at some point in the future, the hobby may move in that direction. My bet would be that GMT, because they're the biggest publisher in the hobby, they would move in that direction before anybody else would. And it would not be a bad idea. I think we were fortunate with Shifting Sands that we were very careful and play tested it enough that we avoided any of those, lethal. What if I play this and he plays that and then I play this? What happens? And rules busted or card sequence busted. We avoided that. But it's, with the Eastern Front, it'll be important to avoid it again because it's the same number of cards, but it's depicting a lot more too. So, but no, it is a good question. I mean, that's sort of the bugbear of card-driven games, is figuring out all the possible card combinations, and of course, and avoiding that kiss of death. It's scripted. I never understood that. I mean, it's like you can't avoid having. I mean, you can't have 1945 events happening in 1940. I mean, if you want a game that's that wide open, you're playing fantasy warfare. American Atomic Bomb in 1939. There's good. I mean, you're going to be pushed down certain paths. I mean, but the idea is to still make it fresh and challenging. I don't know. It just seems to me that that's it's a way for somebody to dismiss a game without really understanding it. Just say, "Oh, it's scripted."
Understood. Yes, I get it. I know. All right, I think we're good. Now, on this note, before we let everybody go, Judd, you see on here, Judd and I are going to give it probably an hour at 1300 hours or 1 p.m. Central Time. We're going to come on and do a ham tag episode that's going to be our first one where we move into publishers, and we're going to actually start with GMT. So anybody that wants to tune in there, in a little bit, I'll put it up just so it's scheduled, and everybody can come back and join us at 1300 CST if they're interested. Mike, anything else before we let everybody go?
Nope. I can't think of anything else. I mean, I'll just say, if you're a designer, you got to, believe in your stuff, believe in your, your design, and take it as far as you can.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for coming on. Hang tight. I'm going to shut the broadcast down here, and then we can wrap up. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. And if you want a little ham tag, if you want a little ham tag action, come back in about an hour. We're going to shut down here. I've got to click several buttons.